My name is Margaret and I am 71 years old. For a long time, I believed that the most eventful chapters of my life had already been written. My days were filled with routine, quiet mornings with tea by the window, long afternoons tending to my small garden, and evenings spent in silence. It wasn't a bad life, but it was one that felt predictable, almost faded at the edges. After losing my husband 10 years ago, I slipped into a way of living that revolved around habit rather than discovery. I told myself that this was simply how aging worked, that excitement belonged to youth, while older years were meant for reflection, stillness, and acceptance. But I was wrong. Life has a way of surprising us, even when we think all the surprises are behind us. It began with something small, a letter. I had not received a handwritten letter in years. Most communication came through calls or emails, and even those had grown scarce. When I saw the envelope on my doorstep, my first thought was that it must have been a mistake. My name was written in delicate script, the kind I hadn't seen since my younger days. With trembling fingers, I opened it and found words from an old friend I had not spoken to in decades. Her name was Elaine, and she had been a part of my life when I was still young and learning who I was. Her letter was simple. She wrote of her memories of us, of the times we used to walk through the city streets at night when we were too restless to sleep. She reminded me of the way we laughed at nothing, and the way we both dreamed of a life that was bigger than what we had been born into. She wrote, "I don't know why I thought of you today, Margaret, but something told me to reach out." Something inside me shifted. It had been years since I felt remembered in such a personal way. That night, I lay awake thinking about Elaine and the girl I used to be. I realized that I had quietly stopped expecting anything new, as if I had signed an invisible contract with time that said I would no longer grow. And yet, here was proof that the story was still being written. I wrote back to Elaine, my hand unsteady at first, but soon moving with eagerness. I told her about my years after she and I lost touch, about William, my late husband, about our children, and about the long quiet that had followed his passing. Days later, another letter arrived and then another. Soon, the letters became a rhythm, a pulse of connection that made me feel alive again. But it wasn't just the letters that brought me back to life. They reminded me of all the things I had stopped doing, the ways I had silenced myself. I hadn't painted in years, though once I used to lose hours in front of a canvas. I hadn't walked down to the lake in ages, though it was only a mile from my home. Elaine's words woke something dormant, and I began to reclaim small pieces of myself. One afternoon, I found myself setting up an easel by the window. The brush felt unfamiliar in my hand, almost foreign, but as the colors touched the canvas, I felt tears well in my eyes. It wasn't about skill or perfection. It was about remembering that there were still ways to express myself, still ways to create, still ways to feel. As weeks passed, I began to notice small joys more vividly. The sound of rain against my roof no longer felt like loneliness, but like music. The golden light of evening stretched across my walls, and I let myself bask in it. I bought flowers just for myself and placed them in a vase where I would see them every morning. Slowly, I began to feel the world expand around me again. The real turning point came when Elaine suggested that we meet. She lived in another state, but not impossibly far. My first reaction was hesitation. At 71, I wondered if it was foolish to embark on such a trip. I thought about the logistics, about the fatigue, about all the reasons I could say no. But then I asked myself, how many more chances would I have to say yes? So I went. I boarded a train and found myself pressed against the window, watching the landscapes rush by. It had been years since I had traveled anywhere on my own, and the movement of the train filled me with both fear and exhilaration. When I finally saw Elaine standing there, waiting for me at the station, it felt like stepping back into a part of myself that I thought I had lost forever. We spent days together, revisiting old memories, but also making new ones. We talked late into the night, not as the girls we once were but as the women we had become. There was something profoundly healing in being seen by someone who had known me before the weight of responsibilities and losses had shaped me. Elaine's presence reminded me that I was not just a widow, not just an old woman moving through routines. I was still Margaret, still alive, still capable of joy, connection, and change. When I returned home, My house no longer felt like a place of silence. It felt like a space filled with possibilities. I wrote more. I painted more. I even signed up for a local art class, something I would never have considered before. And though I still had quiet evenings, they no longer felt empty. They felt like time I was choosing, rather than time that was choosing me. Looking back now, I see that the moment everything shifted wasn't just Elaine's letter. It was the moment I decided to respond. The moment I chose not to let time close me off from the world. Change didn't come in grand gestures or dramatic scenes. It came in small choices, one after another, until suddenly I realized I was living again. I share my story because I want others to know that it is never too late. Whether you are 71 or 81, whether you have lost someone or lost yourself, there is still room for rediscovery. Life does not stop giving us chances. It waits for us to take them. And sometimes all it takes is one letter, one step, one decision, to remind us that we are still here, still capable of being surprised, still capable of joy.